You are listening to the audio portion of the QB Power Hour webinar series. The QB Power Hour is a free biweekly webinar series for accounting professionals presented by Michelle Long and Dan DeLong, who are very passionate about the industry, QuickBooks, and apps that integrate with QuickBooks. You can find out all the details about the webinar series at qbpowerhour.com. So without further ado, here's Michelle and Dan. How are you, and how are the? Can you give us an update on the Southern California fires?
The fires, yeah. You know, it seems like California is always a hot mess. So quick shout out to all of my SoCal people out here. Hopefully those who I know are all okay so far. If I'm missing somebody I don't know about it, please let us know how we can help you. There's stuff in San Diego at the moment. For me, Ventura, I've been okay. The winds are always a lot of fun, but we're good. I've always felt there needs to be a community thing where we can post where everybody lives city-wise. So when there's any kind of a disaster of any sort, we have a better concept of who we need to reach out to with where they're at to help support each other. So, but Thank you for asking, of course. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm headed in the smoky direction. We are currently in San Jose, California, headed south. People are like, "What are you doing driving towards that?" But it is a big area, and you're actually how far from the epicenter of all that's going on?
So I live in Ventura, which I always love to describe. It's right between Malibu and Santa Barbara on the beach. So I'm about 40 miles north of where a lot of the Pacific Palisades and all that stuff is going on. So this time around, I've been nice and comfortable and safe. We had some fires not too long ago in Camarillo. I always feel silly talking about it because we get these Santa Ana winds, which is nothing in comparison to hurricanes or tornadoes and the craziness. But I guess we all have our own versions of the craziness of the world that can impact you at times and just take away your brain focus for sure.
That's one of the things I liked about living in Arizona is that a lot of those natural disasters of earthquakes, we had the occasional wildfire, which, was typically delegated to the mountains, but not like, it's not, we didn't have flooding. We didn't have, all these crazy things that are, but now all bets are off. I mean, you have, you have these things all over the place. There was a tornado that occurred in Arizona last summer. Like, oh my goodness, this is crazy.
Speaking of tornadoes, we're actually going to be talking about one today that's a masterful tornado that seems to impact all of us, right? Which is the migration or the copying of company file, which that's the worst natural disaster, but I digress. If you agree with me, put a 1 in the chat.
Yeah, I've lost my mouse. There it is. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So we'll get started on the Power Hour. So today we're going to be talking about QuickBooks Data Magic, best practices for transferring your QuickBooks Online data, which maybe one of the best practices is don't do it. By the time we're done here, we may actually come to that conclusion. But working ad Intuit for however long that I did, I always was a little bit surprised by the answer that a lot of people gave was, well, just start another company file. and it's very drastic, but it's often the most simplest thing to do when faced with an undocumented program feature or glitch as
unintended feature is what you called it the last session. I think that was unintended feature. Yeah, I love that one.
So we're gonna unpack a few ways that you can actually do that. Starting a new company file and maybe copying from one QuickBooks Online subscription to another, and we'll kind of unpack a few of those ways to do that and the puts and takes that go along with that. Because as we're going to unpack, there's no silver bullet when it comes to just starting over in a new QuickBooks Online subscription. So A little bit of around the horn here. My name's Dan DeLong, owner at Dan With and School of Bookkeeping. Worked at Intuit for nearly 18 years, co-hosting today. Also at Workshop Wednesdays over at School of Bookkeeping. And how am I sounding? I got a new headset. I want to be a little bit more booming.
You sound horrible. You need more treble. Take the bass out, please, so I don't sound quite as bad. No, you're fine. Good. You're good.
The baritone of QuickBooks. And the tenor. What are you? What is your vocal range?
I don't do a cappella, so I don't know for sure. But I am Matthew. My friends call me Spot Fulton, founder of Parkway Business Solutions, also kind of known as Cloud Apps Inc. now, creator of QB Community Live, the Facebook group. Really happy to be a big part of, taking part of these QB Power Hours now. And got to be honest, this is one of the topics where when we discuss it ahead of time, I think you and I talked for well over an hour of just the things we could talk about. And Dan had to remind me that this isn't time to squirrel off, and it's Power Hour, not Power Week, like day or week. So if there's deeper details, we can maybe go into that at a different session, of course. So
yeah, there's plenty of weeds that we can find ourselves in, even just on one of these topics. So hopefully we can get through these three major ways to do things, and we'll save some time for questions at the end here. So a little bit about the housekeeping here. So we're every other Tuesday at noon Eastern. We are now eligible for CPE credit on all QB Power Hours starting actually December 3rd. However, there's a catch, as you saw Blake talking about that. It's not live CPE credit. It is post webinar CPE credit. So you can always go to the channel that we have on Earmark. So this particular, we will still have polling questions, unlike what Blake was saying there. We still have polling questions just because we want to know what you're thinking, but it doesn't count for participation in the live webinar. 5-7 days after today, they will post the course on Earmark, and then you can take those quiz questions there, and that's what qualifies you for the hour CPE credit. But we don't certainly want you to go running off and and expecting the CPE credit, or wondering where the course is. That shows up about 5-7 days after the live webinar. But you can go to the Earmark channel or the QB Power Hour if you like, and review any of the other ones that are up there, and get a CPE hour for those. But bear in mind that they'll be there. If you don't want the PDFs of the slides, the past recordings, podcasts, and other resources, we have qbpowerhour.com/resources for that. And today's handouts are in the chat. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, and we have a couple housekeeping. So if you have specific questions about things that we're going to be talking about here today, please put them in the Q&A. That gives us a better handle on addressing anything that we might be able to do live, or following up with, because chats they tend to scroll in. But if you just happen to have something to say about there's a blizzard warning in Florida, wait a minute. A blizzard warning in Florida? We're in the upside down, man. I think.
I know. It is what it is. But
right, and I'm sure it's sunny and balmy in Maine.
Well, I actually, when I saw it, I wanted to be rude, and like, today's a shorts and a t-shirt kind of day for me, but I felt it'd be really rude for all of our friends out there that are suffering in the cold. So
yeah,
I'll keep the house nice and warm and suffer with you guys to feel better.
All right. We do have the QB Power Hour store. You want to check that out if you so desire. So let's unpack what we're going to be talking about here today. So to move or not to move, that is the question. We're going very Shakespearean here. Whether or not, and we'll talk about some of the considerations when to start a new subscription, and then copying data in advance. So there actually is, in QuickBooks Online Advanced, we'll talk about how there is a way to copy the data using QuickBooks Online Advanced, going to and from QuickBooks Online Advanced. And then we'll talk about, well, what about everybody else? Everybody else who's not on Advance. There are some import-export tools, and we'll talk about the API limitations of such. And then a tip of the hat to desktop, because we do want to always talk about all the things, and QuickBooks Desktop is an option now. So and then hopefully, if time permits, we'll have some Q&A and maybe go into demo some of these things if need be. 47 degrees in Florida. What is...
Okay, so I actually want, as we're talking, because it's fun to do this, everybody put your temperature in, and I want to see who's got the lowest and who's got the highest at the moment. And
right.
Mine is 9.
-9 wins.
Never mind. Okay. No, I'm not going to go check them. So, and everything is being Fahrenheit. If there's anybody from Canada, don't make me do the conversions, please. Like, that's too tough. 70s.
And while we're doing that, I'll launch the first poll question, which is, have you ever had to start over in QuickBooks Online, or been given that as the solution by talking to Intuit?
Linda's here. Deborah, I used to live on Bainbridge Island up there. Enjoy that cold. I'm glad I'm in California. I don't know about all that stuff. So Dan, have you ever done one of these? Have you had to start over?
Yes. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why, but the biggest one that I see is oftentimes there is a discount, especially in the nonprofit space, right? So, there's a company called TechSoup.
Yep.
That is the recipient of donated subscriptions from Intuit. That is all part of their, We Care Give Back. They want to, give some subscriptions, and then TechSoup basically confirms that the organization is a legitimate nonprofit, a 501c3 or 501 whatever. They need to prove and document that they are eligible, and it's not just QuickBooks, but Microsoft Office and other apps and software solutions that nonprofits need to run their business. They pay pennies on the dollar when it comes to the QuickBooks Online subscription. I believe the advanced is $150 for a year, which is, wow, I wish I could score some of those.
Can I create a nonprofit where I do this for other for-profit businesses to get? No, I'm sorry, just kidding. No.
Right, we're just going to resell. No, we're not going to do that. But that's often one of the situations. Like, okay, they've been using Advanced for a while, and here comes this TechSoup into the mix, where they could, potentially save a lot of money by transitioning from their paid subscription to a TechSoup, very deeply discounted. And there can be other discounts and things like that. What are your thoughts about that?
As we kind of close this out, and we've got a slide that kind of talks about some of these as well, I did want to ask you a real quick question, because a couple people have asked this and I don't know it. Handouts for prior power hours. Do you put those on your website also with the session?
Yeah. So there is, if you go to the qbpowerhour.com/resources, there is a link to the OneDrive that has all of them. And as you said that, I realized I didn't do that today.
Okay.
And we have a folder for each year. So that link, I'll have to look at that link and see if that is pointing to the right folder, and it may be looking at 2024 or some older years. So I'll double check on that. But yes, we do have.
Reach out and we can help
all
you,
of them.
Right. So
incidentally, you can go to the particular landing page or the replay link for that particular episode, and those handouts should be there for that particular one as well.
Awesome.
Now, I lost my mouse again.
we'll close that down. So some of the other things, we're going to go to the slide. And one of the things we talked about is reasons to do this. One of them that I was talking about is we always like to do a backup to desktop when we are letting go of a client or we're offboarding a client. Or another option is if you're going to have to go through an audit and you only want to provide a certain amount of information. And like all these, there's got to be a good qualified reason to do it, because it's not like it's a super quick, easy way to do it. So consider the time involved to do it and charge appropriately for your time to do that.
Yeah. So we mentioned a little bit about TechSoup. There could be, hey, I'm using my firm bill discount, and that's part of my service offerings or something along those lines, and they've already have their own subscription. Or maybe you need a second copy, or maybe testing things out in a sandbox.
Workflow, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got a company and you want to actually figure out what's the right apps to use for workflow, and you want to be, or even if you want to train them on how to use the software and you don't want to ruin everything, having a secondary copy with some of their data sometimes is a nice thing to do. They can play around. You don't ever have to worry about them messing up your stuff, and you keep working on your project.
Or training new people, right?
Yeah,
maybe don't giving them keys to the castle, so to speak, of, go ahead and do this. And, maybe it's an onboarding, right? Like we'll give a couple clients that this is a copy of their data. Well, you can't, that's a challenge with QuickBooks Online, is it's redundantly backed up, meaning that, as soon as you enter something into QuickBooks, it's saved all over the place. So maybe creating a couple copies of your clients, putting them in trials or things like that, so to give new staff something to work in with real data, rather than logging into Craig's landscaping, and as soon as you close out, it's gone. Right.
The last one you have here in primary admin issues, I wanted to touch base on real quick, because this is one that impacted me dramatically. Without going too deep, I used to have a business partner, and the way we had set it up, it was his business initially. When you set up a firm, you want to set up the for your QuickBooks Online accountant especially, you should set that up as a accounting at company, whatever, and then always add even the partners in as employees and give them access. So that way, if anybody ever has to leave that firm, you don't have to worry about who has the primary admin and trying to get things switched over, because I can tell you it's really, really difficult and challenging to do it. I know it's a little bit different than what you were saying there, but it's super important to know that part.
Yeah, I mean, and this is one of those things, and we talked about this on the prior Power Hour when we were talking about the Intuit login issues, right? Where to Intuit, the primary admin is the first user to step into that subscription, right? And that could be, to this last point here, something that was delegated to an employee who the employee has left, right? So when the primary admin is not available, right, where they're not being cooperative, or they're not available anymore, or the email is defunct, or any of those, fill in the blank of those reasons why that primary admin's not there, or they just got a chip on their shoulder and they're they're being nasty. That's quite possible too. All of those reasons, I've had many a call where they're like, well, the primary admin is the accountant because they're doing firm based. And oftentimes I would hear their sob story and often wonder, well, what is the other side of the story, right? Because not just because somebody is telling you something doesn't mean it's always true, but it could be. And I remember talking to an accountant who was like, this customer is not paying my bill. And this is my only leverage, is holding on to this primary admin, sort of thing, where, they would call in and say, hey, this is my company. This is my data. This is my sort of thing. So there's always that potential of, there's a reason other than the fact that, they're a jerk, is
Maybe they
not
just saw
always
an opportunity for a fresh start, right? Maybe it was just saw an opportunity for a fresh start. Who knows? But
yeah. And that's something that I would say. It was like, well, if you're a company admin, you can take your data and go home, and bring it down to desktop and then bring it up to a new subscription if you really wanted to. But as we're going to unpack, there's a big but, right?
All right.
Oh, there we go.
There's the unresponsive one. So pretty good there.
All right. But wait a minute. Time out. There's some considerations when not to move, right? Okay, what if they're using QuickBooks Online Payroll? As we'll unpack, there's a lot of things that don't happen when that's the case. Or maybe they're using inventory or attachments, the bank feeds, QuickBooks payments, third-party apps. Oh, the list goes on and on. Maybe they had some existing discount, right?
Yeah. And we're going to go a little bit deeper on some of this stuff. We're trying to touch base onto it because there's obviously quite a few different, each one of these things we can go into deeper of how you can address and fix it. So even though they're a challenge, there's still a workaround. But again, what's the value of doing all of this work?
Right. Is it worth, the $150 a year savings for, because they're going for a tech soup, or is there going to be more work for them to actually move that data? Let's talk about, Matt, you want to talk through some of these things?
Yep.
I noticed somebody said that the slides on the
you go for that one and I'll take care of these. So, I'm a firm believer when you start to go through this process, and if you're trying to save a company money, you need to do a little bit of a pushback and ask some questions. And we all know when you ask them, do you really need a complete copy? Like, do you really need all the historical data? The knee jerk is always going to be, I need everything, always. You need to go a little further and be like, do you really though? Like, when was the last time you actually looked further back, and how long back did you go? By finding those things out, asking those whys a little bit deeper, you're going to determine if you need a full copy. If it's a cleanup job, maybe it does make sense to do start all over, which way to go about it. That then leads into AR, AP, open balances. There's ways that if you're not creating if you don't need an actual full copy, like you're changing subscription wise, there will be easier ways to go about it. And other thing you have to take into consideration is when you have third-party applications, what data, when you connect it, because this is a situation where you have a QuickBooks Online company file, it's already connected to the third-party app, you're going to disconnect it and reconnect it to a new one. So what information might sink and muddy the waters? And you need to understand that when you start to do that as part of your process. And then last but not least, you really want to talk about the timeline of doing all these things, because doing the different ways you're talking about doing this, it's going to take time. Is somebody going to be working in the file at the same time? The worst thing ever is having moving walls. So if somebody's trying to work in the file while you're trying to rebuild something, just don't do it. It's just not worth it. So you have to create a phased approach where you start the first one of, okay, we're going to do, if they're in the file and they're doing stuff, we're going to do everything all the way up to this date. So as of last year, do everything all the way to that point. You guys can't touch anything there. They keep doing their work. And it's understood that it's going to take time for that first part. So let's say it takes a month or two. Phase 2 then becomes doing the rest of the stuff. And then phase 3 is the training and so forth. So you really want to make sure you're documenting that, figuring that out as your scope of work, and it's understood so it doesn't lead to more problems. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of threads to pull you're not going to get paid for.
Yeah, and especially if somebody's working on it at the same time, trying to compare, run your reports to confirm, yes, this worked, or no, it didn't, is going to be infinitely more complicated.
Yeah.
So I did republish the post, so those of you that weren't able to see the handouts on the website, that should be should be good. If not, I will do that immediately following, and you'll have the slides there. Awesome. All right. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the copying with the online backup service. So in QuickBooks Online Advanced, going back to the going into the Wayback Machine, when QuickBooks Online Advanced came out in 2018, there was a couple online backup services, and we want to talk a little bit about backup as a verb and backup as a noun. So QuickBooks Online for all versions is redundantly backed up, meaning that as soon as you hit save on something, the theory is that as soon as you hit save, it is saved in multiple clouds or multiple data centers, wherever that data is saved through Intuit, which I believe now they're using Amazon Web Services. Before they had their own, data centers, but now they're actually leveraging the Amazon Web Services. So there's in the cloud, wherever that cloud happens to be, there are multiple clouds, and your data is redundantly backed up on those clouds for security, right? So if you have or stability, I should say, not necessarily security.
Stability is the right word, right? Because as I was doing research around this, as we'll see, trying to provide other solutions, Intuit goes by like a shared responsibility aspect of this. There's a more appropriate term, which I'm not getting exactly right, but what that means is the fact that they back up the data doesn't mean they are responsible or liable for giving it back to you. So if there was ever an issue, you could still have to pay somebody to rebuild everything. Their backups is specific to their need to be able to do something. It's not hey, something happened and I need to go further back.
Right. Yeah. So that means that if that data center that you wherever you were accessing the cloud to your QuickBooks Online data, if that is no longer accessible, there is a fail-safe, meaning that same sales receipt that you recorded moments ago would be available on that other redundantly backed up data set, right? So you wouldn't see that loss of that data. That's a theory. I'm sure, the chat's probably like, well, wait, I had this happen, or I had anything like that. I mean, there's tons of times where, it doesn't work perfect, but that is the theory. So Chronobooks was an app that backed up the online data, but gave you that restore point functionality where you could say, oh, this was horrible. I need to go back to yesterday. I don't want that sales receipt that I just saved. I want yesterday because I had fill in the blank, right? Like I had somebody come in and enter in a whole bunch of data. We imported a whole bunch of stuff from a third-party app, and that's no longer necessary, or I want to go back to yesterday. That this allows you to do that. So Intuit, in its infinite wisdom, acquired said company because rather than rebuild the wheel, let's buy somebody else's wheel and we'll attach it to our cart. And for whatever reason, they decided to only give that an option for the QuickBooks Online Advanced, right? So Chronobooks, which was a third-party app that could be used for all versions, now only works with QuickBooks Online Advanced, but it's bundled in with the subscription price. So whatever backup service, and we'll talk about some of the other ones that are out there for other versions, you don't have to pay the app cost for that if you're using QuickBooks Online Advanced. But it's not automatic. You have to opt into it, no pun intended. You have to turn it on in order for the backup to start. But what it does is it allows you to choose them, from multiple restore points. And Matt, you were saying that it keeps them for a year?
Yeah, there's another slide a little bit deeper, which I didn't actually know that until I started doing a deeper research onto this. It will retain the information for it says the last 1 year, and it actually says 1 year of time. So the question is, we're talking about as of today, 1 year, 365 days back is what they're saying. With any of the different restore points, you can access it and use it. So after that, all the older ones are gone. I do have some questions if you were trying to back up further. It takes a whole snapshot, so that should just be the basic answer to it, I guess. 1 year. So,
all right. So let's talk about what gets backed up, because devil's always in the details.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got transactional data, invoices, estimates, sales, and receipts. I'm not sure what's the difference between a sales and a receipt, because I was thinking sales receipts because I read them back to back, but I assume that's receipts, meaning the attachments, but they're mentioned over here in other data. So I guess I'm not sure what this means, expenses, because that's not laid out.
It's a good point.
In the transactional data.
Yeah.
But so most of the transactional data is backed up. Your list data, most of them is backed up, but even the other data of attachments, company information, not sure what entitlements mean. Because when I think entitlements, when I hear entitlements, I think of Social Security and Medicare, but what
it's
other
talking
entitlements?
about some of the back end functionality. So what this all has to do with is what's available through the API. And a little bit later down, part of what we do on each of these slides, you'll see there's a reference link you can go to and see where we got this from, of course. But the question becomes, what can you actually access through the API or not? So with their API, entitlements is considering like what features and functionality is turned on or not automatically for you inside of this setup.
Makes sense.
I'm an API nerd.
And then exchange rates, if you're using, multi-currency, your preferences and settings. And then this is one of the unique things. Intuit Payroll info backed up as journal entries. So keep that in mind, right? Like this is part of one of the wait a minute type of showstoppers when you're thinking of copying data, is that even QuickBooks doesn't back up its own payroll service, right? So, and if they, as those native transactions, so paychecks to paychecks versus, in this case, payroll gets backed up as journal entry. So the financial impact, and I think that's the key takeaway for all of this, is that a lot of these solutions are the main goal is that your financial impact of these transactions should be restored, whatever way that you're trying to copy data into one or the other, is that the financial impact of these things. So, but there is a business impact that we're really kind of unpacking and talking about here as to whether or not this is the right course of action. Right.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on this list here?
As you go to the next slide, which I think kind of talks about some of the stuff that doesn't, it also helps kind of answer a question that was asked of what's been your experience with the backup and so forth. So fundamentally, where I feel that all the backup and restore services that we'll talk about, their focus is going to be on the financial data for filing your taxes. It's not necessarily going to be for the fancy artistic accounting you've designed for your custom reports, any like unique fields, tags, different things of those nature. That stuff won't necessarily pull over. But I think theoretically the desire is that you'll be able to like have a version of your book. So once you've reviewed it, everything's clear. You can still see historically what your true tax returns should have been filed off of. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And like just talking about and looking at this data that's not backed up and data that's not restored. I'm like, you go up here, the list data, what gets backed up? Budgets. But then you look at what's not restored, budgets. Right?
Yes.
So great. I'm glad it gets backed up, but what good is it if I can't restore it?
Which brings a point. So the one thing that I was surprised, again, I love doing this stuff and starting to dive into research because I always learn something myself. The cloud backups, especially like the Google Drive, it creates a special .cab file right? That will back up and go straight to your Google Drive. You can't restore it.
Yeah.
What the heck are you supposed so what are you supposed to why are you doing it? I don't know. Is there actually a way to do something with it?
We had the author of the QBO for Dummies. He's really good in Excel. Like, he teaches classes about Power Query and those types of things. And he actually came up with a use case for that, is that when you do this cloud backup and download it as a local file, and in the slides, if I ever get the right slides up on the website, there is an appendix of his workflow of how do you do that, and that's what it talks about here, is that he's able to, because essentially you have a local copy of the customer's file. What he does is he creates Power Queries in Excel and then uses that as kind of like a desktop version of the client's backup, right?
Okay,
so
that's cool.
that's definitely an advanced Excel functionality of using it that way. But to your point, what good is a local backup of Excel files, of CSVs, of all of this information, if I can't bring it into another subscription?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot more devils in the details of what data is not backed up and what is not restored when it comes to copying data from in QuickBooks Online Advanced to, or a copycat in this case of the GIF on the screen.
I didn't see this GIF, everybody. I freaking love it. So it's awesome. Sorry, I love it. Yeah. Nice.
So the data retention and it saves all the backup snapshots within that last year. The backups that are older than that year won't be retrievable. But really, who needs more than a year's worth of active data anyway? If you're
backups, it gives you historical. So just clarification, it gives you access to 1 year's worth of backup points, but those backups will give you it backups everything always. So
from that moment in time, when that backup was created. And there's links there to the QuickBooks articles, so that you too can be as confused as as we are in their documentation mismatch here. But the process of copying your data in QuickBooks Online Advanced, and there's an article in there as well. But yes, it's not as simple as Control-C, Control-V, and everything from the clipboard shows up in QuickBooks. But there's a source and then a destination subscription. You have to turn on the backup service in both, run the backup, and then wait. Because typically that first backup takes about 4 or so hours to run, and you'll get a notification. You'll get an email saying, "Hey, this backup's been done." But then you turn on the backup feature in the new subscription, but then you turn off automatic backups. Right? Yep. Because you don't want it to automatically back up nothing, and then when you choose to restore, then it backs up nothing instead of what you wanted it to. But then you copy from your source to the destination, and then again wait, because that copying will take just as long as probably that backup took.
Now, the other thing is, once you get this done, you're going to want to open up both company files in different browsers, right? I know in 2025, you're supposed to be able to do both companies in the same different tabs kind of thing. We'll see that coming up, but you want to be able to run reports in both of them to validate the information, make sure the stuff still looks good. There's always going to be some little thing that you just didn't know that they were using a certain function, and you want to check that out. And Dan, as they're doing the poll, you've done more, because we've talked about it a couple times where you've worked on them, where you've used this QBOA. And kind of one of the unofficial tips out there is, if you've got a lower level version, if you upgraded to advanced, you could then do this copy over. And, if you really felt your client needed to downgrade again, you could do so, but you could upgrade to advanced to do this whole process if necessary.
Yeah. Like you can, like if they're on Plus, for example, and then they go to advanced for the tech soup, right? the discount, you can upgrade them to advanced, turn on the auto backup. You pay for a month or so of advanced to allow you to do this copying. And this is, I'm more on the camp of see what works, right? You can always purge the data in QuickBooks Online if it doesn't come over properly. And that, I think that's more of, coming from that Intuit mindset of trying to solve or provide an option, but not necessarily knowing what you're in for, right? Without intimate knowledge of the apps that are connected or the other connected services that are inside of that QuickBooks. And that I think is where a lot of that, well, just start a new company mindset comes from, right? Because that will certainly, oftentimes be the answer, right? In our QuickBooks desktop days, a lot of times things would get frozen and you have to suggest to restart the server, which when a company's open in the middle of the business day, that's not the easiest thing to do, right? there are a lot of people accessing that server in the middle of the day because that's why it exists to begin with. So restarting that server, as it may solve your short-term problem with your QuickBooks desktop and multi-user case, doesn't mean that that's the best thing to do at that moment in time.
Yeah. As kind of was brought up is when you're doing, obviously, if you're changing subscriptions, any discounts you have, you're going to lose. So there's an equation that you should be looking at when it comes to figuring out whether you should be doing all the stuff as we kind of mentioned before. So,
yeah. So when, the third or the, if advanced to advanced is not an option, or that didn't turn out so well, because you've waited, 10 hours for this to be restored, only to find out that you didn't turn on sales tax in the destination file, or, some kind of setting that didn't work right. There are a plethora, or is it plethora?
Yeah.
There's a lot of third-party applications out there that could potentially be the solution, but if this list looks familiar, there's a reason, because there are QuickBooks Online API limitations, and knowing the history of the Chronobooks was an app, right? And it had to deal with its own limitations of accessing. You want to talk through some of these buts when it comes to the
So over for many years now, I've become extremely familiar with the QuickBooks Online API, and most of the limitations when it comes to the apps out on the market, whether it's a Rewind app, there's another one we'll show you, the Chronobooks issue, and ironically, some of the stuff, even QuickBooks Online to QuickBooks Online behind the scenes, has to do with the code that they've written that you can access to be able to grab information and play with it. So the examples of that, QuickBooks Online payments, it's something that doesn't transfer over right away, but this is one where if you work with the support team, they can move your account over to the new company file. It's one of the few ones you can actually do something there, but it takes extra steps to do it. Payroll, you're toast. Nothing you can do there. If it's a built-in payroll, you're going to end up creating a new one, which means now you need to start thinking about the timing of when you're doing this stuff. And maybe you're starting to copy a company file over with the plan of attack of starting at the beginning of a year or a quarter in a new company file, because yes, that means new employee information, all those kind of details. There isn't a way to take a different payroll or an independent payroll and migrate it into your QuickBooks Online at this time. So it's one login and you see everything. Yeah. Other things, bank rules, your reconciliations, like the customer types, your price rules you're seeing here. Tags, we know those are going away. That's not available. Additional custom fields. And then one of the other ones would be any advanced functionality. So if you've got advanced workflows, your memorized reporting, your recurring transactions, automatically sent reports, all of that will have to be recreated. And you need to put that into your final phase of the whole project to put that stuff in.
Yeah. And somebody had asked, what has your experience been with the QBOA backup? Has it worked? Did it work? I worked with a nonprofit who was moving, because of the whole TechSoup issue. To say that it was done within an hour, no. It took several days and several attempts because there were challenges with the destination or the source or somewhere in between. And these third-party apps are, part of that, right? It's all of these online API limitations. They were subject to their own rules of engagement because it was, coming from an app. Now, Intuit then now has the keys to the castle sometimes. So for these apps that they acquire, oftentimes they can give them special exceptions, for some of these things. And you'll see that with things like Spreadsheet Sync, as opposed to, other apps that are able to send things to Excel. So let's talk a little bit about some of those third-party applications, Matt.
Yeah. So Rewind has been the primary competitor for the longest time to what was once Chronobooks. And you've noticed there's been a major drop off of talking about these type of backup specific softwares because there are these limitations, and all of us accountants, rightfully so, have always kind of just said, look, you're not actually able to copy all the data. So can you actually call it a true backup if you're not getting the full backup? It's only doing certain information. But the nice thing is, if you're using the different backup softwares, this is a way with both Rewind app. I've used that many times. SysCloud, I researched, but I haven't used it. You can use this across any of the QuickBooks Online versions, straight across either way. And the price is the same, however you'd want to do it. They've got some great detail on their websites of showing you what will transfer, what won't. But all the limitation stuff we talked about before, it's still the same on everything on this page. Then the next option is if you want to use import-export tools. I talk about it a little bit more, I believe, on the next slide, and there's quite a few different ones that are listed here. SASAN's a popular one, Transaction Pro. CDAT is my personal favorite. It's more expensive, and it goes much deeper into the API, but you really have to know how to use it, and you really have to have good Excel skills with almost all of these. Q2Q is phenomenal in the desktop aspect of this. I use it all the time. Z-Access is phenomenal for QBO, and they do zeros, so you could actually take stuff from a QBO and then move it over and so forth and such if you needed to as well.
The one thing I like about Z-Access is it's a desktop application that connects to QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online, right? So that gives you a 2 for 1. And we'll talk about the buts with some of these things. One thing that I found about Z-Access is that the mappings are part of it.
So hard. Yeah.
What is this actually in QuickBooks? And because it does talk to both, it has them all, right? So even though you may see, it looks like it could map to this. Well, no, that's only if it's in QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Point of Sale, because it also connects to that as well.
I've used every one of these, and this is definitely my bag, but we could do a whole session on just this part of it. So if there's people that have questions, feel free to reach out. And I could tell you some of the nuances between all of them, but respectful of time, we can't go into all of it today.
All right. So I added that whole thing about the mapping, but talk a little bit about the import order.
So I back in the day, before newer apps have come out, I used to do this all the time, and you would take data from one, and the way you go to put it back in matters. And I want you to think about if you're really just trying to copy invoices over. Well, you can't copy invoices over unless you have your customer information. You can't do it without your products and services. You can't do it without your terms, your chart of accounts. So you really have to have certain information put in order. And then to go deeper, if you've got your, when you're doing your products and services, you need your chart of accounts in ahead of time to know what to tag to different areas on purpose. So the order in which you go through all these pieces to push things in is very, very, very important. And then the next piece is with it, which is still to do with the order, is the link to transactions. So again, this is a nerdy API thing, but what is difficult with QuickBooks Online is when you try to reference an invoice or something, you don't actually reference the invoice number. You reference their ID number, which is the database number across it. So to link a payment that was there back, you actually have to know the pieces, which means you need really good Excel skills. You can do it with Google, but I'm an Excel person. Do some lookups to attach the pieces. If you're trying to do the same thing with attached documents, everything else, you're going to need some super skills to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and check the settings, because I had a horrible experience trying to move through a third-party app where the referenced document, like a bill to a bill payment, they were not, there was a company that did not use reference numbers. So they had tons of bills that did not have a reference number. And the tool was designed to look at the reference number as a unique identifier of the linkage. And what happened is because they had tons of bills not being numbered, the tool said, well, this is the reference number. It's nothing, it's blank, it's null. So I'll go back to the original bill that had none in it and I'll append it. So they ended up having one big bill that was dated the wrong date years earlier that had all of their bill information for all of these payments that were supposedly paid. A very big mess.
Turn off your auto applies before you're doing any of that stuff is basically the key functionality. Turn all of it off, because if you import the payment, it's just going to go and then you have to undo it all.
That's the official blips, the creeps, the blips. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So in our last few minutes here, we're going to talk about the desktop, the round trip approach, which is where you're going from QuickBooks Online to desktop and then taking that desktop file to a new QuickBooks Online subscription. The advantage is that QuickBooks Online, going from desktop to QuickBooks Online is super simple, right? The process to actually do that. The challenge is all of these things, the things that don't come over, like estimates, purchase orders, recurring transactions, locations don't exist in QuickBooks Desktop. There is no such thing as a pay down credit card transaction, or a sales tax payment is handled much differently in QuickBooks Online as it does in desktop. So there is a lot of potential things for transactions not to come from online to desktop. But again, if that is the most ideal circumstance, that may not be out of the ordinary, right? So if they're not using inventory, any other things that you want to chat about here or make sure we call attention to, Matt?
Yeah. So when I was creating this list, I specifically tried to focus on what does not move, but the link will get you back to a whole table of stuff and you can see it all there. Because if you're going to be doing round tripping, this is the complicated part. You need to think about when you go from QBO to desktop, and we'll go to another slide where it's got a link and shows a video I've created on how to do it, what will transfer, what won't, and then going back the other direction, there's going to be things that don't go back the other way also. So you almost have to kind of like look at those lists and make sure that anything you're using or playing with is not going to be lost along the way. I've, for multiple years, I've gone through and continued to test this export functionality capability. This still works to this day. I have people watching the video all the time. I'll put it in the link to it in the chat right now as well. Be sure to like and subscribe. And it will help it really, it'll help you get the process done. But round tripping, and this the top part of this, because the subscriptions are changing on this, if you don't have a current subscription for a desktop 2024, you won't be able to buy a new one necessarily, which means you're toast there. So that means you're going to have a license for 21 or 22, which is one of the ones where you didn't have to have a subscription to be able to open it with that. Once you have that, then you can open it in a desktop and start to play with it. So again, I really want to stress, like, you need to think about why you're doing this. Companies call me all the time saying they want to do it. And I tell them desktop's going away. Are you you're going to have to go back anyway. So why are you doing it if it's not truly a round trip? So just really think about it when you're doing it.
Yeah, it really just depends. I mean, you want to make sure from these things that don't, that they're not using a lot of these, or it's not a hardship to recreate these things. And you may have, an all of the above approach, right? Where maybe you use one of these tools or processes to get the majority or the lion's share of your data over, and then you use something like SASANT where you can be more surgical and extract the estimates, for example, or just the open invoices, or the things that you can't, that are not part of the come along for the ride option. But yes, it still works. And I think Miriam was asking a question, or somebody had asked a question that you wanted to answer live. And
I meant to type it so I could put the link, but I put the link in the chat instead. And when they get the slides, I can have it that way. Because this actually, it's going to walk you through step by step by step. You can always pause it. It gives you the special, you have to go to a fancy URL to get to this thing, to download the tool and so forth. And then ultimately, after you've done that, if you run into challenges, reach out to me. I'm happy to try to help. I'll book a call with you to, just try to assist and get you past a hurdle if you need it to.
Yeah. And I've actually talked to a couple people who've been trying to do this process of exporting from QBO to QuickBooks Desktop, and it always seems it's seeming to error as of late. And repairing QuickBooks has actually corrected this. So repairing, going into the control panel of Windows and running the installation again, and just choosing the repair option has gotten further, because it should just work, right? And it just, sometimes it doesn't. So
you also have to play with the browser. So Chrome, I've seen where Chrome stops working. You have to use Edge, and I've also tried using Firefox to get into it sometimes. So we're super close to time-wise. The things to consider, there's some stuff here you guys can go back to, and there's articles on it. But I want to go to the last slide if we can real quick. This is one more, I believe.
One more.
There
we go.
I know you're not supposed to put a whole bunch of words on a slide because it's horrible, but the concept was to give the very raw, basic ideas of how I would do this. And guys, there's so many side tracks you could take off of this, but I wanted to try to help. It's always clean everything up, run all your reports. Data storage is free on a computer. Run everything to Excel. It's easier. Start your export process, get it open to desktop, review it all. If there's anything you need to fix all the stuff. Reconcile your desktop just up to that date, the amount, so it all matches for as many accounts as you can. Review all your list items to see if there's anything that's active or inactive that you want to get rid of. Might as well do a little bit of tweaky cleanup if you need to, right? Get all that done, have those reports ready, start the process from desktop to back up to QuickBooks Online. But right before, you back it up, run verified data. That should be quick and easy since it was just done, but just make sure there's no problems there. Then you start the migration process, open the new QBO file once you're notified, run all the reports again, check it against you can start by checking first against the other QBO. If it doesn't match great there, check it against your desktop to see where your thing broke and didn't turn out right. And then you're going to review all your company settings. Be nice, put their logo in for them, their company details. Now you start looking at your bank feeds, your third-party apps, your merchant processing. Double check after you do all that stuff, double check your reporting again, make sure all that stuff matches. Invite users. And I forgot, step 0 is charge them to do all this first.
Right. Or what you could do is set them up as a standard user and not be the primary, so that they can see it, but not necessarily walk off with with all that hard work that you've done.
There's legal ramifications on that. I mean, I've always been able to get paid, but I tell you what, the stress and frustration of having to do that, it hurts every time.
Yeah.
So,
it's always a challenge when it comes to that. And then because of all of these challenges that you will likely experience, explaining that it's not my fault, right? Because there's a limitation to everything here. There's no silver bullet that will just take a snapshot of your data and move it over into a brand new subscription like nothing happened from before.
It's not a croc that fits everybody, right? So like croc shoes that just one size fits everybody.
And they're so comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, we hope you appreciated or got something out of this. Actually, I do want to throw the last. I've been sharing the poll for forever. So, oops. Hold on a second. What happened? Oh, did you launch that poll?
No, you did. But I maybe closed it. So I never know if I'm closing it or not. So.
Well, let's see.
Luckily, folks, you'll be able to go into Earmark to get your CPE there. Right. Is the most important part of it. But we always want to do the final one, which is finding out whether you learned something from this or not. Yeah. So
if you learned something new, just throw that in the chat or on the, the FaceTube or anything else. Let us know if this was worthwhile. We appreciate you joining us today, and we'll see you in a couple weeks where I think we'll actually be doing some of the Intuit news and some of the tougher questions that have been showing up in the Facebook group. So stump the chump next time.
Which one's the chump though? I'm the new guy, so right.
One of us is the stump, and the other is the chump. So to be determined who the chump is on that. Matthew, thank you for all your hard work of putting all this stuff together today, and appreciate you all joining us. And we'll see you next time on the QB Power Hour. Have a great day, everyone. We hope you enjoyed listening to the QB Power Hour podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Facebook group. You can find those resources and much more at qbpowerhour.com.